meeting to order tonight. Renata, if you could do the roll call, please.
Sure can.
Sure can.
McEvers.
Here.
Wood.
Here.
Evans. Gookin.
Here.
Miller.
Here.
English.
Here. Jeff, we're getting a little feedback. Can you hear that, Jeff?
Yes, I can. We're working on it.
Okay, all right, thank you. So let's rise for the invocation. We have Mark Porter with the Church of the Nazarenes. Welcome.
Good evening. I'll invite you to bow your heads with me in a word of prayer. God in heaven, as I've considered what to pray for tonight, the word that keeps coming to mind is peace. And I pray tonight that your peace would reign not only in this meeting, but also in our community, our state, nation, and world. And so, Father, we just give this time to you. We invite your presence into this place. I would ask for wisdom for these community leaders, for our city council people, and for others as they discuss business that pertains to our community. God, just flood them with your wisdom this evening, Lord. I also want to take a moment just to pray for our community. I want to pray especially for our law enforcement community, for our first responders, our healthcare workers. God, would you flood them even in this moment with your peace, God? Would you give them wisdom and strength as they do the job that you've called them to, Father? We pray for our families in this community. We pray especially for our families as they have young people getting ready to start a new school year in the midst of an odd time, God. Would you give wisdom to them? Would you give peace to them and discernment? Would you provide patience and peace to our educational workers, God, for our superintendents, our principals, our teachers, God? Would you just bring your peace into our community? And may tonight's meeting be productive for our city. We thank you for it. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Woody, if you'd lead us in the pledge, please.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So, Renata, we did have an addition to our public hearing. That was noticed correctly, so we don't need any action here
Correct.
right now, so we're good there. We're going to have a couple of chances for public comment. We're going to have the regular public comment portion right now. Later on, for anyone that wants to talk about the budget, there is a separate time for public comment on the budget. So that will come later during the budget time. But now, if there's anyone wishing to come up to give general public comments, you can come on up. Come on up. Please state your name for the record, please.
My name is Annette Barnes. I have resided at 1324 East Pennsylvania since June 1971. Good evening, Mayor and council members. Thank you for the opportunity to address the council. I am coming before you to ask you to please consider an amendment to the city code pertaining to the raising of chickens within the city limit. I believe the chicken code needs to be revised at this time, as it only pertains to noise and fowl orders and number of chickens. I'm not here to say do away with the chickens, because I fully realize that past council judgment allowed for chickens to be raised within our city limits. I believe that they may not have considered some of the complications of the coop and run placement on their property. I also realize that people today like the experience of eating their own eggs and knowing what the chickens eat as well. I get it. So I am not here to abolish the acceptance of chickens. I think it may be time to review the current code by adding restrictions to the placement of the coop and the run in relation to neighboring property, especially a dwelling. Upon researching a few other cities, there is a definite respect in the placement of coops and runs in regarding neighborhood property and dwellings. One example I found, Citrus Heights, California, Code 106.42.030 G6B, setback requirements, states a minimum of 20 feet from any habitable structure on an abutting parcel of property. Tullahoma, Tennessee, Code 10-108 states chicken coops and runs are not allowed within 25 feet of a dwelling. So my plea for this code addition comes because of a neighbor who put a coop and run in March of this year. The entire coop and run is located along our property line and fence. The run is within 6 feet of our dwelling. And by dwelling, I'm going to specify, I mean our bedroom and our bedroom windows. You can easily imagine the ammonia smell on a nice 90-degree day and how that wafts into an open window. We have also been inundated by flies that love the chicken poop and the garbage that is thrown out for the chickens to eat. We have also had an abundance of ants. We've had advanced pesticide over to spray our area, and he said that the chicken feed is the great draw for the ants. And then as well, we have mice that we have been catching. On August 14th, I did make contact with our neighbor and asked if there was a chance they could rotate their coop to run east-west rather than north-south. The back of the coop would still be butted up against our property, but that would be against our shop, well distanced away from our dwelling. When I talked to the neighbor, they said no, that would not be a chance. We would agree to that, but they would not. 1 week later, they told me they would attach a fabric tarp to our fence if we wanted. I declined. The neighbor selected this spot that is wedged between our fence and is entirely buffered by their garage and enclosed carport. They cannot even see the chickens from their house or be on top of the smell and the clucking. So my request is that the council and planning director add a setback restriction concerning chicken coops and runs in relation to property lines and dwellings, and that current coops and runs cannot be grandfathered. If needed, I can email or text pictures of the problem we are facing if you request. But at this point, I thank you for allowing me to come forward with my request.
If you wouldn't mind just leaving your contact information with Troy, the city administrator. It's interesting that you bring it up at this time because I was doing some research on the 100 year of Coeur d'Alene and looking back into 1920, and they were discussing chickens 100 years ago. And at that time, I think there were too many chickens running loose in the neighborhood, and they wanted to coop them up.
Right.
Right. So we've cooped them, but now we might need something different.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Okay.
if you would leave your contact information with Troy.
Thank
Okay,
you so much.
appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Others wishing to come up for public comment? Anyone else wishing for general public comment?
Okay. My name is Stephanie Doucette, and I am a registered nurse and I live in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. I will read a segment of our cease and desist letter that we sent to the city of Coeur d'Alene, dated and received on July 15, 2020. I attest and affirm that the following statements are true and correct within my personal knowledge and belief. Federal preemption, my glasses with this glare. Kindly remember that the Federal Communications Act of 1996, TCA, at 47 U.S. Code, Section 332, parentheses C, parentheses 7, parentheses B, parentheses 4, recognizes the actual environmental effects of radio frequency microwave radiation from wireless telecommunications facilities, indicating, by extension, is recognition of the actual health effects therefrom. Sorry, my glasses. Despite the existence of a few wrong precedents constituting encroachment of the third branch onto the second branch, the Act unambiguously left the regulation of the health effects of wireless telecommunications facilities, radio frequency and microwave radiation entirely within the state and local officials' authority, obligating said officials to protect the residents against health effects with regard to all related activities of WTFs, placements, construction, modifications, and operations. In plain reading of the 47 U.S. Code, Section 332, parentheses C, parentheses 7, parentheses B, parentheses 4, no state or local government or instrumentality thereof may regulate the placement, construction, and modification of personal wireless service facilities on the basis of environmental effects of radio frequency emissions to the extent that such facilities comply with the Commission's regulations concerning such emissions. As you can clearly read here, all the operations of all WTFs remain and has always been under the regulatory authorities of state and local officials. Operations which pertain to radio frequency, microwave radiation transmissions of wireless telecommunications facilities and transformation of electrical energy into such were attempted to have been preempted by the authors of the original Telecommunications Act. However, Congress removed operations from the exemption clause codified at 47 U.S. Code Section 332, parentheses 7, parentheses B, parentheses 4, positively leaving the regulations of the operations within the state and local authorities' hands for any and for all reasons and grounds: health effects, environmental effects, agricultural effects, energy conservation, atmospheric effects, weather forecasting effects, astronomy effects, aesthetic effects, historical preservation, property effects, aviation and safety, local and state authorities. I finish with, we kindly ask you to use this clause to stop the using of Verizon's created ordinance and create a new ordinance immediately. We have a tried and tested non-telecommunication industry written ordinance, and stop parroting the false doctrines of attorneys and the telecommunication industry. We represent you to think for ourselves, not to be order takers from the profit industry and attorneys. I have expressed no matter of mere concern or any substantive matter, solely facts and laws. I accept your oath of office. Thank you. Apologize for going over.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Mark Weary. I live in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, and my background is in the healthcare industry. I will also read a segment of the cease and desist letter to the city of Coeur d'Alene dated and received July 15th, 2020. On October 1st, 2019, the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals further ruled against FCC overreach in case 18-1051, which states on page 146, because the Commission's preemption directive lies beyond its authority, we vacate the portion of the 2018 order purporting to preempt any state or local requirements that are inconsistent with the Commission's deregulatory approach. This ruling confirms that Internet transmissions fall under Title I, which is regulated by localities and is not subject to the TCA or any preemption therein. However, at this time, Coeur d'Alene officials may be incorrectly considering applications for Internet transmissions to fall under Title II. This letter therefore demands that Coeur d'Alene declare a moratorium in order to upgrade our ordinance, and during the moratorium, cease and desist from 1, the processing of any and all WTF applications, 2, the placement of any new WTF, 3, the construction of any new WTF, 4, the modification of any WTF that would result in the addition of any antenna, the alteration of frequency, or in the increase in any effective radiated power, ERP, from the WTF. And finally, 5, allowing any operations of any WTF whose post-August 9, 2019 application's final inspection date was in any way incomplete per required review under NEPA/NHPA or otherwise deficient. In connection with the above ceased activities, You may wish to inform applicants of the DC Circuit Court Case 18-1129 requirement that they comply with the above rulings and NEPA and NHPA. We kindly ask you to use the clause to stop using the Verizon-created ordinance and create a new ordinance immediately. We have a tried and tested non-telecommunication industry written ordinance. And stop parroting the false doctrine of attorneys and the telecommunications industry. You represent us. To think for yourselves, not to be order takers from the profit industry and attorneys. I have expressed no matter of mere concern or any other non-substantive matter, solely facts and laws, and I accept your oath of office. Thank you.
Mike, you have done, since we had some folks come up and speak to us last time, you've had some conversations with some people in regards to this, and maybe just share your conversations that you've had.
I think, as we discussed with council, I think, I forget when we adopted a current version of our wireless facilities ordinance, it is preempted by federal law. So the speakers have referenced a court case out of the D.C. Court of Appeals. So one of the things to remember is that there are 12 circuits in the United States, courts of appeals. And so the D.C. Circuit doesn't really have any precedent over the Ninth Circuit where we reside. And so that's kind of why we have the Supreme Court to moderate or decide conflicts between circuits. So in consulting with our industry, or not industry expert, but an attorney who specializes in this type of law, it is still the radio frequency, the regulation of radio frequencies is still solely within the jurisdiction of the FCC. That's it. They should set the standards. Now, I think there is an argument to be made that they have been less than diligent about researching and exploring what are appropriate frequencies, but that's just an opinion. Others would say it's fine. So, but that is their job. The case out of the D.C. Circuit has no precedent or no impact on us, and the cease and desist letter authored by private citizens has no legal effect on us either. So I think we're concerned, we're aware, we have an ordinance that looks at this, and that's that.
Okay, all right, appreciate that, Mike. Come on up.
Hello. My name is Susan Green, and I live in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. I'll read a segment from the City Council documents and a segment of the cease and desist letter to the City of Coeur d'Alene, dated and received July 15th, 2020. I attest and affirm that the following statements are true and accurate and within my personal knowledge and belief. Coeur d'Alene Resolution 20-006, the following was stated. Councilmember Wood noted the federal government did not give the city any wiggle room in allowing the use. Mr. Gridley also clarified that there is no ability to deny the request. Councilmember Gookin said that he would vote against the request as he does not believe the safety is there. From Coeur d'Alene City Council minutes dated January 21, 2020, state, staff report, and discussion, Councilmember Gookin asked for clarity regarding the city's inability to pass rules or regulations on these types of encroachments. Mr. Gridley explained that the city cannot say no. Councilmember Wood asked who wrote the agreement and requested that Mr. Gridley go over the terms of the agreement. Mr. Gridley explained that it is a boilerplate agreement from Verizon and they have negotiated certain clauses. Public officials might question whether the wireless industry attorneys demand that they parrot our hands are tied by federal law, constitute anything other than false and dangerous cultish indoctrination. The 24-year repetition of this rumor fails to substantiate it. Along with this false doctrine, industry attorneys Pressures upon public officials to suppress constituent speech should be recognized as the very fronting of officials on behalf of a mob-like criminal enterprise to coerce by fraud in the inducement, the placement, construction, modification, and operations of wireless telecommunication facilities. Without this prima facie First Amendment violation, these would never have otherwise occurred. No more absurdity, incoherence, or irrationality from outside counsels. Please, else officials, very standing must be in question. Thus, in addition to the aforelisted cessation, we finally call for the cessation of any such false pronouncements denying the actual legal rights of constituents under the officials yet extant neither preempted nor preemptible Idaho Constitution, our building codes, and your oaths of office, and for an immediate moratorium so as to update the Coeur d'Alene ordinance and recognize within it the federal laws, precedents, and policies that have been ignored. May you support constituents and bring to realization their full and primary rights to health, safety, and a clean, energy-efficient environment, as well as their freedom from assault, warrantless surveillance, privacy invasions, and data seizure in their homes and communities, and thereby provide them the quiet enjoyment of their streets. We kindly ask you to use the clause to stop using the Verizon-created ordinance and create a new ordinance immediately. We have a tried and tested non-telecommunications industry written ordinance, and stop parroting the false doctrine of attorneys in telecommunications industry. You represent us to think for yourselves, not to be order takers from for-profit industry and attorneys. I've expressed no matter of mere concern or any other non-substantive matters, solely facts and laws, and I accept your oath of office. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Others wishing to come up for public comment at this time?
My name is Johnny Stenberg. Hello, everyone. I live in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. I'm a physics major student. I will refer to the city's wireless communications and facilities regulations as it relates to violations of its own agreement as outlined in the cease and desist letter to the city of Coeur d'Alene dated and received July 15, 2020. When the local government reviews incoming applications, its staff needs to determine the true identity of each applicant. As obvious as this may seem, the specific agent, shell company, and franchise of the wireless carrier in practice often fails to appear correctly on the application. This applicant entity needs to be named as its true corporate identity, not as a doing business as. Listing its board of directors on the application provides local staff the necessary positive identification, therefore the requirement should be added to our ordinance. Additionally, the entity filing application must be registered to do business in the state, so a copy of the registration with the Secretary of State and the true name of the applicant should accompany the application. Even when these requirements do not appear in the ordinance, the local government should refrain from permitting until such information comes forth. Positive ID is essential for risk management. The smaller franchise, while uninsured or personally insured with few assets, holds liability passed along to it by the larger corporation. For this reason, requirement that the applicant provide proof of insurance and or the assets should be added to the local ordinance. If the local government requires a master license agreement, then the licensee under that agreement must also be the same entity as the applicant. The certificate of insurance, which may be required by statute, ordinance, or the master license agreement, must name the licensee as its insured, not a doing business as. Should the council find itself unable lawfully to deny an application, it must pass all liability to the applicant by requiring commercial general liability coverage without a pollution exclusion. The applicant should be required to submit a copy of the insurance policy so that a risk manager can review the actual exclusions. Since major insurance companies do not cover damages from radio frequency microwave radiation or low frequency EMFs, municipalities are coerced sight unseen into huge liability when they permit wireless telecommunication facilities. Workers who install, modify, and construct equipment are not protected by OSHA, which follows FCC guidelines only voluntarily and does not independently monitor transitions. Similarly, no agency checks regularly on public microwave radiation exposures from wireless telecommunication facilities. Since the state has failed to make these requirements, these additions to our ordinance are necessary. The city has allowed our community to be encroached by unknown entities who own the structures. The structures are now known to be in violation of federal and state communication laws, regulations, and controlling decisions. I refer to your own document that was created for you by the telecommunications company Verizon, as stated in Coeur d'Alene Resolution Number 20006 and the Coeur d'Alene City Council minutes dated January 21st, 2020. We kindly ask you to use the clause to stop using the Verizon-created ordinance and create a new ordinance immediately. We have tried and tested non-telecommunication we have a tried and tested non-telecommunication industry written ordinance. Stop hiring the false doctrine of attorneys and telecommunications industry. You represent us to think for yourselves, not to be order takers from for-profit industry and attorneys. I have expressed no matter of mere concern or any other non-substantive matter, solely facts and laws. I accept your oath of office.
Young man, could you come up just a little bit? I applaud you for coming up and speaking to the council. Just a little bit of advice is that when you are addressing a group like this and you want to get your message across, I would say when looking at these council members, you read that so fast that no one really understood your message. I'm sure you had a good message. So just for next time, you're a young guy, you're in the learning process. When you're giving a speech or giving a presentation next time, just slow down a little bit so you can get your message across. And so all of these people that you want to get your message to can understand what you said. So maybe just some advice from an old guy.
Thank you. I appreciate that very much.
Yeah, you bet. Anyone else wishing to come up to give public comment? Okay, if not, then we will move on to our next piece of business. And our next piece of business is announcements. Any member of the council have an announcement tonight? Dan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to talk about chickens for a second as the Barneses are leaving. So I've been answering Ms. Barnes' emails for a while, and I know that code enforcement was out and looked at it, and there's really nothing they can do because there's nothing in the code about where the coop can be placed. So I met with Hillary, and we discussed what could be done. So Ms. Barnes could have gone to the Planning Commission, for example, or she could have just written a letter to staff. But we really wanted to see what the temperature was of council, whether council would be interested in exploring revisiting this or sending it off to the Planning Commission just to see if people have enough passion about chickens. I can understand that it would be, annoying to have chickens right next to, 5 feet away from you if the setback's 5 feet. But I don't know if that's anything we want to explore or anyone has any opinions on.
Yeah, I would say it's a nuisance. And anytime you have a nuisance, we should probably take a look at it and see if we can avoid the nuisance. Dan?
Yeah, I would agree. Rather, I'm not sure what's the best path, where it should start or whatever, but I think that's a very real issue. And actually, and given the circumstance out there, I think we can expect more kind of pressure on some of those. And that makes sense for somebody to look at it. And if that somebody is best us, great, let's do it.
So Hillary, you can take a look at the chicken issue and see, and probably not just for chickens, there's probably could be other animals that you would have that you'd want to have some type of setback. I would think any other animal cages, whether, I don't know what other kind of animals you got. But.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I would just add that I'd be interested to contact the police department and see if there's been complaints like this, that they don't have the ability to enforce because of code for other animals and chickens and ferrets or whatever it might be. I don't know.
All right. Any other council announcements? I have one piece of business. I would like to reappoint Kathleen Saylor to the library board, so I'd be looking for some action there.
Mr. Mayor, I would make a motion to appoint Kathleen Saylor to the library board.
I'd second that.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move for approval of consent calendar as presented, including Resolution 20047.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve the consent calendar. Any discussion on that item? Roll call, please. Renata?
Miller,
Yes?
McEvers,
Yes.
Gookin.
Yep.
English,
Yes?
Wood.
Yes.
Move on to other business. We have resolution number 20-048, approval of an agreement with Northwest Grading for the award of the transmission line bid. Terry?
Good morning, Mayor and Council.
Maybe
Good
evening.
evening, rather.
It's been a long day.
Time zone, yeah.
I see we do not have a projector this evening. I had a small presentation, but that's fine. You've got it in your packet. So. I'm bringing before you tonight contract and agreement and approval of the award of bid for Northwest Grading Incorporated. We went out to bid for the first phase of the transmission project. Let's see here, there it is. And we're amazed that we got 11 bidders. We have not seen that in ages. So I was very pleased with that. A little shocked at the range of prices. We were a little concerned with that, but we'll get into that just a little bit later. All right, here. So the second segment we're doing, the first phase is from the new Hutter well out on Hutter Road, just south of where the trail intersects the road there. And it'll extend to the industrial standpipe located here just outside Industrial Park, just south of Hanley. It's about 3,500 lineal feet of 18-inch pipe. It is not in the trail itself, but it's in the trail right-of-way. And we have worked with the adjacent property owner to have some temporary additional easement for construction of 20 feet, so that'll make it easier for the contractor to stay off of the trail. That's our goal, is not to impact the trail or any of the asphalt on this section. So there will be no asphalt in it, or no paving, no asphalt included in this project at all. It's a connection at the tank itself and dead ends at the new well site. As I mentioned, we had 11 bidders, with Northwest Grading being the lowest responsive bidder at $328,248.51. Engineer's estimate was $535,200. We were kind of concerned whether the contractor had forgot something. So I had Steve Cordes from Welch Comer, our engineer on the project, follow up with him, went through his bid, made sure all the prices were correct and everything added up. Called the owner, Bill Crick, and he is comfortable with what he has laid out there. His plan is to do this project in late October, early November, so it's kind of a late season job just to keep his crew busy. So he felt that the numbers were good, and so that's what we're looking at, is doing this. I was hoping to go a little bit earlier, but it has to be done by spring for the new well, so there's nothing critical about it. As I mentioned, it should not impact the trail. So with that, I would like to request that council approve the lowest responsive bid to Northwest Grading Incorporated and approve a contract for construction of the 18-inch transmission main along the Prairie Trail.
All right, thank you, Terry. Questions for Terry? Any questions of Council? Kiki?
Terry, we talked about this briefly, and thank you for explaining that you did get back to the contractor, because that's a good deal for the city, but we want to make sure it's accurate. Just because of the timing, are any of these tie-ins that, do they require any asphalt to be replaced?
There'll be no asphalt for the tie-ins.
So there's no conflict with the plants closing in the time of year?
Right, I think that's kind of why they were looking at doing it late, because there won't be any asphalt plants open, and so they'll be a bit done with other projects. So this is just kind of a tied over project to keep them going through the winter. It should only take a few weeks to do. There's one critical connection. We may have to take the industrial standpipe out of service for a week or so to get everything done. That's the opportune time to do it, because you really don't need it at that time. So it really kind of works out.
Okay, thank you.
Woody?
Terry, we haven't talked a lot about that well and stuff, but it's kind of the future. Is that correct? Is it trying to keep you up?
Yeah, it's more, this year was a little bit less. I mean, we've bumped up against our maximum production. Our peak hourly, we're hitting that every day pretty much throughout the summer. So this will help bolster that and keep the tanks from draining quite so fast. It'll also reduce our dependence on the Hanley well.
So that standpipe, where it's going, where's that get fed from now?
It gets fed by a 24-inch main from Atlas Well in that section of the town. We're looking at taking Atlas Well and redirecting it down to the general zone, because we need more capacity in the general zone. So we're looking at switching that well over, although I'm planning to be able to use that well either way.
Nice.
That's my plan for that portion of it. That'll be another section or another phase of this. It'll be a lot more complex and asphalt involved in it. So this will be the easy piece.
So when I look at that map, and everything south of it is still farmland, right?
Yep.
It's in our city limits. It's probably the last big piece to be developed. Is that well going to help water that area?
Yes, As part of this project, we had the model updated and run, and we included that section in the model run at R17. We were hoping that would be about the density or a little less. So we included that 500 acres in that model run.
So that well will be able to keep up with that.
Yes.
It's awesome. It's nice to save money once in a while, huh?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Terry? If there are no other questions, we'll be looking for council action.
Mr. Mayor, I would make a motion to approve resolution number 20-048, approving an agreement with Northwest Grading, Inc. for the award of the 18-inch water transmission main bid.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Roll call, please, Renata.
McEvers,
Yes.
Gookin,
Aye.
English,
Yes.
Wood,
Yes.
Miller.
Yes?
Motion carried. Thank you, Terry. We will move on to the approval of staff to enter into contract negotiations for CDBG agreements with the Idaho Youth Ranch for a full-time therapist position, the Children's Village for a part-time therapist position, and a CDBG CV agreement with Safe Passage. Hillary.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Yes, it's kind of a mouthful. We're here before you asking for a few requests related to our Community Development Block Grant funds. The first is the pot of money from the 2019 Community Opportunity Grant, the remaining funds from that, and the other is to use some of our COVID funds that we've received through CDBG. So the decision point before you is, should council authorize staff to enter into contract negotiations for the remaining 2019 Community Opportunity Grants and to use some of the CDBG COVID funds to respond to COVID-19. So the first requests are under that 2019 grants funds. So as I mentioned, we have some remaining funds. We're looking to fund Idaho Youth Ranch in the amount of $44,000, and that would enable them to add a full-time therapist position. And then for Children's Village in the amount of $19,392.93 to enable them to add a part-time therapist position. And then under the CDBG COVID funds, to award Safe Passage $26,145 for them to provide domestic violence survivor support through sheltering, food during hotel stays, rental assistance, and staffing for shelter and crisis lines. And that would be out of the COVID funds. So just a little bit of background on the CDBG. So we had in 2019, the annual action plan, there was $196,520 was budgeted for the grants. And so that's when we go out and we notify our close to 200 stakeholders and we let them know that we have this funding available and it has to meet all the CDBG criteria. And so we did that last year. It was October 1st was when we notified, and then, oh, I'm sorry, that was so October 1st. So we had done some awards. The United Way was awarded, and so we actually entered into an agreement with them. It didn't get signed. They realized they weren't going to be able to do this kindergarten boot camp just because of COVID-19. That just set them back. They thought this is going to shake up everything, and just given the uncertainty, they'd like to wait and reapply. And so that put $44,000 back on the table, plus we had some other funds that had not yet been allocated. And so basically $66,392 is sitting there. We need to spend that down. We also, because of COVID, HUD has waived that 15% cap that we normally have on public services projects if there's something that's COVID related. And these two requests under this pot of money are both being impacted by COVID because there's more mental health issues, more need for the therapist support. So the two groups had already applied, and so that's why we thought, let's work with them and see if there still is a need and if they could clarify their requests and let us know how COVID-19 has impacted their needs. Otherwise, we would have to go back out to the community, and we have another pot of money that just came in from the 2020 HUD allocation for CDBG. So we thought if we could work with these groups that have this need right now, that allows us to kind of spend down that pot of money. We have our COVID funds, and then we have our 2020 grant. So that's how we were looking at the money. So the organizations both responded, provided a lot more information on why they need it and how that would help them. And we met with our ad hoc committee that reviews the grants on August 12th, and they unanimously recommended that we would award the Idaho Youth Ranch in that amount of $44,000, which is the amount they requested. And then Children's Village had actually requested twice this amount, but we just didn't have all the funds. We only have that 66,000. So they did indicate that even if we cut that in half to this $19,392.93, that would really help them. That would give them the part-time ability to hire the licensed therapist. So both of those would allow us to, if council supports this, that would allow us to spend down that 2019 grant, which is great, and help organizations that are definitely being impacted by COVID, and they already had needs before COVID-19 hit. So on the other pot of money, talking about kind of the COVID funds we received from HUD, and so we've been before you several times letting you know how we're addressing this. So we received that $199,675 through the COVID funding. And so that is really supposed to be just to prevent, prepare for, and respond to the coronavirus. It also has to meet HUD eligibility and really to benefit the low and moderate income individuals in our community. Council also, at our last meeting with you, where we talked about this, said let's prioritize housing and food. But that kind of, that's definitely where we're seeing a need, and we see a need this fall as well. So we did, through Councilmember Miller had suggested that Safe Passage might have this need because they're trying to shelter people. You have these domestic violence survivors. Now, if any of them are COVID positive and need to be housed somewhere, there's definitely a need for them to receive additional assistance for the sheltering, the food, counseling, and all of that. And so they did reach out to us, and they had expressed that this is a need and would benefit greatly if council supported the COVID funds for this. This slide really shows the breakdown. So we had, of that pot of money, the $9,935 was allocated to general administration, so that's staffing to administer the grants. And then the remainder of that was available for the grant funds. And so showing kind of the breakdown of how we've allocated so far. So this first line is St. Vincent to Paul for the homeless sheltering and services. That's still sitting there. Thankfully, there haven't been any COVID positive homeless cases yet. So we have that sitting there. Family Promise is taking advantage of this opportunity to house some homeless families, so that's great. So that's underway. Boys and Girls Club, we have awarded that for their food pantry. And also Lake City Center has expanded that Meals on Wheels, so those have been spent down. So we've allocated $60,000 of that grant fund. Remaining funds is $139,454. And then if you take that $80,000, we said let's kind of sit on that for this fall and winter and see, because we expect an increased need. Then we have this amount here, the $59,454 to spend. So if you take the 26 they're asking for, you'd still have over $33,000 left for just kind of this summer, and then you'd have the additional $80,000 as well. Performance analysis, so mentioned there's great need. I think these organizations have all proved that they already had a community need and COVID has made it worse. And so this would really allow them to move forward. Wanted to note again that the Idaho Youth Ranch and Children's Village did receive that unanimous recommendation from the committee. And we are asking you this evening to authorize staff to enter into the contract negotiations for the remaining 2019 Community Opportunity Grant funds with the two organizations for the dollar amounts noted, and to authorize staff to enter into contract negotiations for the use of some COVID funds with Safe Passage for those needs that noted in that amount of $26,145. So with that, we would stand for questions, and Chelsea has more specifics if you were questioning any of the details on the request for funds.
Questions by council for Hillary? Dan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thank you, Hillary. I'm glad we're able to spread this around. Do have a question or a concern for these two. Idaho Youth Ranch wants a full-time therapist, and Children's Village wants a part-time therapist, but this doesn't really fund an ongoing position, and they're aware of that, correct?
And Chelsea has spoken with them about that. There's an ability, if you want to come up and speak to kind of the sustainability, that was one of the questions that she did ask them is, how would you be able to continue this, right? Because you're right, it's not an ongoing
So
funding source.
they both are implementing the program and expecting that their revenue will increase. So they're expecting it after that first year it will be sustainable and they'll be able to continue it on.
Good, as long as they're aware. Then on St. Vinny's 24K, if they end up not spending that, what happens to it?
then it would go back into being available.
And is there a deadline on that or anything?
I think we gave them till
Did.
December 31st, I think, and then we were going to reevaluate then.
Okay. Very good, thank you.
Other questions, council? I just had a question. It's a date question similar to Dan. So these funds, we had that $80,000 holdback for fall and winter. Are all of these funds intended to be expended by December 31st of 2020, or is there extension beyond that?
Beyond that.
We have 2 years.
2 years to expend it, okay. All right. Woody?
So kind of along Dan's line, those two areas that there wasn't enough originally because of the 15%. They are not banking on that same revenue this year, next year to keep that job going. Is that correct? So we go back to 15% next year for these types of jobs, right?
It's been waived for 2020 and 2019.
Okay.
So if we need public services to be, as long as it's COVID related, the cap is waived for both years.
So once we get past COVID and back to the norm, that's only 15% there, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, and they're aware of that, the recipients? I'm sorry.
Well, it
Yeah.
would be only a
So-
one-time grant request, so
Gotcha.
they wouldn't be hopefully coming back and saying we need additional funding each year to sustain it. I think kind of like Dan was saying, like this is a one-time. Hopefully they'll be able to, through some of the insurance and some other things that they're doing fundraising, be able to sustain it.
Okay,
But yes, we'll make sure the organizations know beyond the 2020 grant that it's going to go back to the 15% unless HUD changes that.
okay, thank you.
Dan?
Well, and for full disclosure, I did used to have an association with Anchor House and Idaho Youth Ranch. I don't now, but I would, in addressing Dan's question too, is both, all three of the organizations, but in particular, Idaho Youth Ranch and Children's Village have long-term, very successful track record in the community, and I can guarantee you they know exactly how one-time grants work, and they have the ability and the means to go out and generate it for long-term. That's what they do. So
And they both had pretty detailed plans on how to do that and make it sustainable.
Any other questions? If there are no other questions, we'll be looking for council action.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move to authorize staff to enter into a contract negotiations for CDBG agreements with Idaho Youth Ranch for a full-time therapist position, Children's Village, a part-time therapist position, and a CDBG, oh my God, you're kidding me, agreement with Safe Passage, shelter, food, rental assistance, and staffing for shelter and crisis lines.
Second.
Sorry about that.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, Hillary and Chelsea. Now we'll go to our public hearing. This is a legislative hearing, the annual appropriations for fiscal year 2020-2021. Vonnie will give the staff report, and then we will have an opportunity for public comment. I believe we have a couple of people that wish to give public comments tonight, so I will let you take it away, Vonnie.
I'm sorry, Mayor, and if I can clarify, this is also part of that amendment to the agenda, that it also is to hear testimony regarding the reservation of the right to recover the current year's foregone increase of $687,110.
Exactly.
Good evening, Mayor Woodmeyer and City Council members. Tonight, I'm asking for approval of Council Bill 20-049, the annual appropriation ordinance for the 2021 fiscal year. This ordinance does not include any of the 3% tax revenue increase allowed and does opt into the Governor's CARES Act funding for property tax relief of $5.5 million. I am also asking for approval of Resolution 20-049. This resolution reserves the foregone amount of $687,000 of unlevied property taxes should Council Bill 20-049 be approved as presented. Please stop me at any time with any questions you might have during this presentation. Proposed changes from the resolution that you approved on August 4th include the removal of the 3% property tax revenue increase of $687,000, a decrease in the amount of the usage of fund balance in the amount of $144,000, and a decrease in property tax revenue, which is offset by an increase in CARES Act funding. The only change to the expense side of the budget budget proposed from the resolution is the removal of $629,000 placeholder. Any questions on that one? This next slide just shows the new construction year over year, which has been fairly consistent for the last 5 years. The council has taken new growth revenue generated property tax increase each year. The tax revenues budgeted in the current fiscal year is $22.9 million. The ordinance before you tonight does not include a 3% increase to that number. It does include the new growth to the city of $454,000, the levy amount needed to pay the 2015 general obligation bond levy, and a decrease of $5.5 million to be offset by CARES Act funding for a total of $18.6 million in property tax revenue. The history of tax increases approved by the City Council include a 2% increase in 2013, a 2.5% increase in 2017, and a 3% increase in the current fiscal year. In the last 9 years, the city could have taken 27% in increases, 3% each year. If the council decides to take 0 this budget cycle, they will have limited those allowable increases to 7.5% and will have an accumulated foregone property tax balance of $6.3 million.
Bonnie, I have a question just while you have that up there. So can you show those years that we didn't take tax increases, did we use fund balance? And if we did, how much? Do you have that information? I'm sorry.
I don't have it right in front of me now. Generally, any time we have taken fund balance in the past, it has been for one-time purchases and not for ongoing expenses.
Woody, just going from memory, and others may be able to help me too, I think that last year was the first year while I have been here that we went into fund balance to balance the budget. And you study those, Dan Gu, can you study those numbers? Is that what your recall is too? So
pretty much.
The last time was 2020.
Right. And last year, we did offset that with one-time purchases.
Yeah, and that was one-time purchases only were paid for with fund balance in 2020.
And fund balance is usually used at the end to kind of catch everything out. We don't usually budget the use of it, right?
The year before that one, we had 0% of fund balance in the original budget.
Okay, thank you.
On September 30th, 2019, which was last fiscal year, the unassigned fund balance was $9 million, which equates to 20% of budgeted revenues for the current fiscal year. The Government Finance Officers Association recommends a fund balance of 2 months of revenues, or 16.67%. This slide shows the current fund balance projections. The one unknown for this projection is revenues. Without taking lower revenues into account, the fund balance may end up around 17% by the end of the current fiscal year, with the use of $1.2 million in fiscal year 2021, as stated in the ordinance before you. The fund balance could dip to 15% or lower. Here's a historical look at the fund balance year over year, how it ebbs and flows. The increases to contracted wages and benefits in the general fund amounts to $1.3 million. This increase does not include any new positions. This is the amount needed to fund the current contracts with the employee associations. The decrease in July of this year to PERSI for the fire department helps offset this increase for next fiscal year, as shown on this slide. Even with a 1.8% increase in health insurance premiums, health insurance for fiscal year 2021 will decrease by approximately $30,000 due to more employees who are single and or don't have children, and more employees who are opting out of the city's health insurance and going on their spouse's insurance in order to take the increased contribution to their health reimbursement accounts. This saves the city approximately $10,000 a year per employee. The budget ordinance proposed includes an increase of 3.45 full-time equivalents, The CDBG administrator increase will be paid for with grant dollars. Other increases include one police sergeant, a parks maintenance worker, an EMS worker in fire, and various decreases and increases to part-time. This slide shows the changes in the city's valuation from 2019. Using the estimated valuation from the county for fiscal year 2021, the projected levy rates, if the council approves a 3% property tax revenue increase, puts the levy rate at $4.24, with no property tax increase, but opting out of the CARES Act funding would put the levy rate at $4.12 per $1,000 valuation. Opting into the CARES Act funding would put the rate at $3.18. This would put the levy rate at approximately $1.28 less per thousand than the current levy rate. This slide shows the difference in property taxes paid for a $300,000 home with no increased valuation, but a 3% increase in property tax revenue to the city. The next slide shows the difference for a home with no increase in valuation and no increase to the amount of property tax revenue to the city. And the final slide shows no increase in valuation, no increase in property tax, and the decrease allowed if the state takes the CARES Act funding offered through the state. And with that, I will take any questions.
Questions for Vonnie? Woody?
So this budget's asking for 1.2 fund balance, is that correct?
Correct.
And out of that, how much of that is, we can't walk away from? Is there a amount in the 1.2 that is just the cost of doing business, or is it stuff, or is it people?
There's only $270,000 in here in capital, so pretty much this entire budget is ongoing expenses.
So that's ongoing whether we took them or not. And we have to come up with 1 point something.
1.2.
1.2, just to make ends meet and not buy a bunch of stuff.
Correct.
Okay.
Other questions? Any other questions of council?
I do, Mr.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Christie, go ahead.
Couple. Vonnie, I was wondering if you could explain a little more detail about the fire department per-seat balance. I don't really understand where that comes from.
The fire department had to pay an extra 5% of their per-se rate of what the city paid in due to, and I might have to go to Kenny or Troy on what that was for. It's been higher for a number of years, but it is now funded to a point that they've dropped that 5%. So the per-se rate on the fire department is now the same as all public safety.
Christie, I might just ask Kenny if you come up. You've worked a lot of years on that issue. And you might explain it's dropped several times and it's finally come down to.
It has, exactly. In 1981, the retirement system for the firefighters is called FRF, the Firefighter Retirement Fund. And then Percy took that over in 1981. When they did, we still had the responsibility for the pre-1981. Well, as you know, the city's paid a very big amount of money for that over the years, and as folks get older, it starts to drop a little bit simply because of, I don't mean to be rude, but people dropping off the insurance rolls. The mayor and I have been working, Troy have been working hard on this for 4 or 5 years to have them really look at the actuarials and see where they wanted to be, and they landed on 135% funded. So it did get above that. We got 2 years ago, we got to drop an amount, and I can't tell you exactly what that is, but finally they're done with it, so we start to get our over contribution now from now on. So we'll get that $382,000 every year now.
And Kenny, this was paying for anyone that retired prior to 1981?
They could be afterwards if they were hired before 1981. So that's why they had to stay on there. Very similar to the police department has that retirement fund that the city is responsible for too.
Right. So Christie, this is a separate retirement fund for those people that qualify, separate from anyone that's currently working.
Correct.
This fund finally got up to 135% value. They felt comfortable not being able to have to charge the municipalities anymore to put money into that
So
fund.
I kind of remember that from when I worked for the city in police. And Kenny, what I remembered is I thought that the fire department was trying to save that money for a special project. Am I wrong?
Well, our biggest thing was to open up Station 4.
Okay.
But we were hoping that we were going to get those funds pre the opening of Station 4, and that happened. I mean, the council, their wisdom of the council was you paid for those positions to begin with. So that was our biggest concern, was for Station 4. And the local did get it put in their contract that they could at least have discussion with mayor and council on where those funds end up going.
The ones that we're talking about tonight?
Yes, exactly.
Have we had those discussions?
I think to a degree, and a lot of it is they understand that in the financial position that we're in right now, the $382,000 is going, you could say it's going to the fire department just because it's going to fund everything that's going on in the department.
Okay.
And we are seeing some raises in our budget and in our personnel this year.
Okay, thank you. I didn't know the details, but thank you. And if I could, Mr. Mayor, I had a couple of questions for Bonnie, not for you, Kenny, but for Bonnie.
Well, but Dan may
sure.
have had a question for.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Christie. So the 382,000.
Yes, sir.
Just goes into the general fund.
Yes, sir.
And this is fireman retirement money
That's correct, sir.
that they paid into.
The city did, yes.
The city did on behalf of them.
Yes.
I had heard that they wanted to use that as a way to build up, say, their HRAs for after they retire and before they can go on Medicare.
I think that was a part of a discussion that they had early on, was that a possibility?
Okay, so so that's not happening?
No, sir.
How does that happen?
Well, that would have to be through council action.
Okay, it doesn't have to be in a contract?
Well, it would, anything that adds to benefits would ultimately have to be discussed in the contract.
Okay.
And approved by council to go into the contract.
So it's something that could come forward in the future?
It could.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Dan?
Well, just that I know there is a legitimate concern for sometimes people with retirement plans and then it ends up short. But it sounds, I mean, this is a situation where all of those folks, everything that they were promised is going to has been delivered and will be delivered for that group.
Well, no, there hasn't been any change in the benefits for that group. And what they're looking for, as Councilmember Gookin said, was post-employment benefits. Because there's a few states around us through where part of what they do when you retire, you do get post-employment benefits. The state of Idaho does not offer that. And Troy, tell me if I'm wrong, in the trust, you have the ability to stay on the city's insurance now throughout retirement, paying at the city's premium.
You are correct.
Any other questions for Kenny?
I got one.
What?
So Kenny, I've always looked at these savings that come out of your guys' thing or your working and stuff it sort of helps me justify positions.
Yes.
EMS is a good one this year. I know it's been a battle to get there, finding the money, but also so that's some money that comes out of your somewhat savings. You put it in the general fund. We give some of it back to you to hire a position. Also, EMS, you got a raise from EMS this year. So, I mean, fire, I always think of you guys as one of those kind of half a business. You generate income, which is rare. You're not a water department or a sewer or anything like that, but you do have revenues coming in.
We do.
So I always thought of this as somewhat the savings can be applied to justify a position. And you guys are looking for an EMS officer this year, right?
That was part of, if you will, a business plan. We knew this was going to happen. We didn't know exactly when, but we knew it was coming down the road eventually. And as you know, over the years, and I just talked to Christy today, and it kind of makes me laugh. This is my 20th budget, believe it or not. That kind of dates me a little bit. But what the fire department's always tried to do is come to council with funding mechanisms for what we want to do, because we realize the most important, or the most expensive thing we do, it's the most important thing we do, is hiring bodies, and that's such a long time commitment from council. We've known this was coming, and we found a way to pay for our assistant this year, and we hope we found a way to pay for the MS position as well. So the long version shortened down is, yes, we do try to come to you with options.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kenny. Appreciate that. Bonnie, I believe that Christie had some more questions
Thank you.
for you.
Well, and I shouldn't probably direct them at you, Vonnie, because I don't have any issues with the numbers you've provided. I had some more down in the weeds. We've been talking about police and fire most of the time, and we've spent a lot of time on this budget, and if I haven't thanked everyone for their hard work, thank you. But down in the weeds, since we probably won't talk about this for another year, Troy, a couple of meetings ago, I asked you about the police department's ability to go, if they find a used car that they need, what's their ability just to go grab it right then? And I don't think I'm real clear on how fast they can move. Do they have to come back through you? Does that take any time? Because these things come and go very quickly.
Correct. And right now, we have in capital for the department, not very much money, because we don't have much capital in the whole general fund. So we have a line item in the street department for used equipment, and that tends to be for the street department needs.
That makes sense, but if there's savings within their own budget, can they quickly go grab a vehicle?
Classically, we've worked with the chief on that, been very successful. When they have savings that they aren't going to use, we have gone forward and said there's a need for a vehicle, and we make that happen because we're going to stay under the total budget. So we have moved on those opportunities in the past when there's savings in the budget. So October 2nd, there won't be any savings unless we're way out on hiring anybody in the police department to buy any capital.
I guess what I'm looking for is efficiency, how quickly they can move, because as you know, if you come up with a good used government vehicle that you might find online, it could be gone the next time you look, if you have maybe a window of just a few hours to purchase it. So what I'm looking for clarification is, what's the level of authority for the police department to move forward?
The department, with your approval, will have that budget authority that's in there. The reworking of a line item is what we work with the comptroller, the administrator, and the police chief, meaning their biggest line item is personnel and those costs. So we look, and have done this in the past successfully, a quick opportunity to take advantage of a vehicle. So we've worked on that administratively to make that happen.
Okay, I think that's a big priority. Then the other question I just wanted to circle back to, what we talked about probably back in June, was, is there somewhere in the police budget, the parking revenue that we talked about, that this council, before my time, put into effect?
The parking fund is a separate fund, so there, in the budget is transfers from the parking fund into the general fund, which does include that. So it doesn't go back against transfers, kind of have to go transfer in, transfer out. So we don't put it back into the police department's budget. It ends up in the general fund to offset those expenses. Our transfers in and out have to balance at the end of the year, so we can't just throw it back into an expense line item.
But they use it throughout the year, they do have that income that comes in?
Correct.
I guess I'm not, because I
Yes.
wasn't part of this, so I'm not really sure how
Yeah,
it works.
if you look in the parking fund budget, there is transfers to the general fund in there, which include that.
Okay.
But yeah, it's not going to be right there where you can see a line item of it going into the police department budget.
So it was never meant to increase to offset their expenses, it was just a
Well,
transfer? Is that right?
We can't really offset the expenses because we really need to record revenues as revenues and expenses. So it's budgeted. What they need for that is budgeted, should be included in their budget.
It was for the ambassador program, and the ambassador program is included in their line item budget.
Okay, so it's just a straight across, filled with general funds.
Right, yeah, and it is in the, there's a transfer from parking to the general fund, and the amount for the ambassador program is in the PD budget.
Okay. All right, thank you for the clarification.
Any other council questions at this time for Vaughn? Dan?
Well, I don't have a question, but just I'm very pleased that, I mean, this has been a painful process, and I can remember different versions of this where it looked like, oh man, how in the world are we going to make this work? And everybody's kind of some give and take and all of that, but I certainly appreciate that, this is very responsible and appreciate the magic that got worked, so.
Thank you, Bonnie. I think that's all. Oh, did you have another question?
I have a couple.
Okay.
Yeah. So, Bonnie, let's go back to where we were. So if the COVID thing and the governor didn't do what he's doing, would we have more money to work with or less money?
If you did not take the COVID money and you took a 3% tax increase,
Right.
you would have more money.
And how much more?
So the 3% increase is 600-ish thousand, and the amount that would actually net out in the city would be ahead from the COVID money would be 200,000. So if you took the 3% increase and didn't take the COVID money, you would have about 400,000 you could increase in this budget.
Okay, so there's just 200,000 difference between taking COVID and not taking.
If you take the 3%.
Take
If you
3%.
don't take the 3% and don't take the COVID, then you're short 200,000.
Okay. I have one other question, and I'm not sure whether to ask the chief or Christie. So I got an email from the chief after we talked about sergeants and stuff, and I could have sworn he said he can make it without sergeants, and yet we have $100,000 tucked in for sergeants. Did I miss something, or was that just the compromise?
Maybe we'll have the chief, if you come up and talk about.
Thanks.
That'd be great. I know we've had some conversation, Wood, about that we have added a number of patrol officers without adding any supervision, and that was the chief's, plan is that, if you're going to add so many patrol officers, you need to have some supervision, so I'll let you take that note.
Well, good evening, Mayor and Council. Sure, directly to answer your question, I have an old organizational chart. I think the oldest one I have is in the 80s. I want to say it's like 81 or 82 or something like that. And we actually had more supervisors then than we do today. Having said that, we also realize, and this is probably the second part of my email that you're referring to, we understand the financial straits that the city is in currently. And so what I'm saying is we definitely have a need for that position. However, we've kicked the can down the road for a lot of years now. We can probably do it for an additional year, recognizing that this current financial situation the city's in.
I appreciate that, because that was kind of my thought, was if we can all kick the can down the road another year, maybe things will be better next year, but I get it.
One of our major concerns really is just the, I hate to say it, but the overall accountability and liability I think that we might face out there with the number of patrol officers that don't have direct supervision of a sergeant on a very regular basis. They're reporting to different sergeants, and the inconsistency along with some of the gaps in some of our administrative processes could really need to be addressed.
I remember you talking about overtime to cover for that. You kind of brought some numbers forward and stuff, so theoretically, will that go down will that direct effect will help?
It would assist to a degree. So we're talking about the way my understanding of this, the budget as it sits currently is they're talking about funding a position in January and just one sergeant, when really it would take two to get us to the patrol staffing allocation where we really need to be. So there would be an effect in that if we have an injury on that one side of the week or something like that, or which is what we've experienced in the past year a couple different times, where we had to backfill that position on overtime, sometimes for months. Or, for instance, we would reassign somebody from their current position. So we would go without someone doing traffic and special events, or we would go without somebody doing another job to fulfill that role. So there would be a small decrease, I hope, in overtime for those types of circumstances. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Woody, to add to that too, as part of this CARES funding that's going to come from the governor's office, 3% of that comes back to the city. That's the $200,000 that Bonnie was talking about. So in rough numbers, the city is going to get a check back from the state of Idaho for, I believe it's $5.7 million, of which the city is going to be able to keep $200,000 of that, with the intent that that investment go back into public safety. That was a big part of the program, and then the $5.5 million approximately is for property taxpayer relief.
Okay, so the 200 is one time. It takes care of the fire chief, it takes care of the EMS chief, and one sergeant,
Yeah.
basically,
Right.
for 1 year.
Right.
Okay. So we'll be looking at this again next year.
Yes.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So I think Bonnie was going to show us that
So
slide.
on this slide, you can see the decrease in property tax revenue of 5.576, and then the increase in the CARES Act funding at 5.778. So that's the $200,000 difference from.
Thank you.
Bonnie? All right, so if no other questions for Bonnie, we'll move on to public comment, because we have a couple of folks here that would like to make some public comments. We'll open up that portion of the hearing. And David, do you want to start us off?
You need to swear me, or, okay. David Lyons. If you approve this budget as proposed, you'll be taking $40,000 of taxpayer money from the police or from the rainy day fund balance to give to a secretive, probably illegal, pay-for-access boondoggle that provides zero value to the public, CDA 2030. You know that the great majority of CDA 2030's funding coming from you and Ignite is taxes paid by the public, yet it arrogantly refuses to provide any openness or transparency to that public. You know that what little it gets in public donations comes from businesses which have an executive on the CDA 2030 board. That sure looks like paying for private meetings with city officials to discuss the city's future. Like Parkwood Properties pushing a health corridor urban renewal district, which hugely benefits Parkwood. You know that ever since CDA 2030's vision plan was completed in 2014, it's been a redundant fifth wheel. 1.5 people, unsupervised, no office, spending who knows how little time liaisoning, facilitating, assisting, collaborating, make work the city and its consultants can easily do. You apparently care more about CDA 2030 than the voters whose taxes pay for it. Tax money earned working at a real job, running a real business, pleasing a real boss and real customers, at risk of losing them if you do a bad job. Unlike the make-believe, pretend world of CDA 2030. You can stop this by stopping the taxpayer funding. Are you afraid? Or you can at least condition any further taxpayer funding on CDA 2030 agreeing to be transparent to the taxpayers, open meetings and open records, like government bodies. Come election time, voters will remember what you do on this. I'll remind them. Thank you.
Thank you. Susie?
Yes, it takes me a minute.
We got all night. We can wait.
Sorry. I'm not sorry, it's just the way it is. Good evening, all of you, Mr. Mayor, Council. God, it's been a long time since I've been here. Once again, it's time to set the budget, and with that, my comments. I addressed the council on November 5th, 2019, and commented that as a citizen of this city, I expect not only transparency, but also your critical review of each and every financial transaction. This remains true today. At that time, I commented that it appeared that the city had not increased impact fees for approximately 14 years. It appears that this is so. Troy later emailed me the explanation that the city or someone was waiting for the updated comprehensive plan whenever that is completed and approved and adopted. I think it important to note that the comp plan is merely a suggestion. In the meantime, one might wonder the cost to the taxpayers had impact fees been updated to cover the capital improvements necessitated by growth. Pardon me, I have to breathe. With the delay of time and the tremendous growth in the city, citizens should question the costs that city property owners have borne, perhaps needlessly, had these fees been adjusted on a regular basis. Okay, number one, Person Field. Here we are again. Purchased years ago with a city-adopted plan, and finally the second major improvement. The first was irrigation. $300,000 in restrooms, tentatively scheduled for 24-25. Great. It seems to me that the $500,000 approved for a dog park acquisition in Northshire years ago could have been applied to this park. The project was dropped, and that amount that was budgeted simply vanished without explanation, never to be seen again. Jewett House. You know, I noticed that insurance is not noted for this building, despite the rental use of the building and grounds. As it is used for senior activities, should not the income be dedicated to the Lake City Center for the benefit of seniors? Also, I noted a minor amount paid to an employee, inasmuch as there is a long-time live-in caretaker is a 1099 issued. And what would that salary be besides the pittance that was shown on the budget? The water operating fund had a line that stated it was contributed to capital developers, no revenue for 2020 or requested for 2021. I'm curious as to what that is. Public parking. Where's Christie? Depreciation expense of $900,000. Depreciation in 2020 it was $471,000. Knowing that parking lots are not depreciated, to what account is this transferred? Be transparent. Are these excess funds, like a slush fund? Years ago, the Downtown Association and the city entered into an agreement in which the association agreed to maintain the capital improvements, streetlights, signals, bricks, etc. This included painting. Year after year after year after year, the taxpayers pay the association to follow their agreement. Year after year after year, nothing is done. Face it, your lovely downtown is unkempt and is badly in need of maintenance. There is always an excuse, but I remind you in the downtown that they signed the agreement, they want the money. And in past years, I expect the Downtown Association to adhere to the agreement. It is time for the city to enforce it before giving more tax dollars. In closing, I have asked the city to demand that the chairs of the nonprofits address the council and show exactly how they spend taxpayer funds they are given. A report for an employee, no matter what the exalted title, is insufficient, as the boards, not the employees, are responsible for all funds received and spent. I would add that this has not been the case in the past. Taxpayers expect transparency and should demand same. Thanks.
Thank you, Susie.
You never have questions, so I'll sit down.
Mr. Mayor,
Christie.
could I actually ask Mr. Gridley a question?
You bet.
Well, Mr. Lyons has come here a few times and brought this up, and I guess my question is, have we asked 2030 to have open meetings? Has this been a discussion?
I haven't been directly involved in 2030 for a number of years, but I think it is somewhat misleading to say they're not transparent. If you search cda2030.org on the internet, available to everybody, their records, their plans, their members, their actions are all there. So they are a private corporation. They do get funding from the city. They get it from other people. So, but I guess to specifically answer your question, I have not been directly involved with them. I don't know if Hillary would want to address any conversations with them.
So I serve on the board as staff, and so CDA 2030, you've heard kind of my pitch before and how valuable they are to the community. They operate as other nonprofits do in the community. So they don't have the open meetings, all of that. It's just, they're just operating under the nonprofit. I mean, it's something if the council wanted to say, if you're going to receive our funding, then you need to have copies of the minutes. But City Council receives copies of the minutes from the meetings anyway already. All of the other information, they do the annual report with the financial information as well. And Mr. Lyons has requested public records request every year since we've been in business with CDA 2030, is my understanding. So that information is available. It's just they're not broadcasting it because other nonprofits aren't asked to do that either. So they're just following nonprofit protocol at this point. They're not trying to refuse anything. It's just following procedures.
Well, I'm wondering if it would be reasonable, it seems reasonable, that we would at least get a detailed summary of the money that the city provides, of how that's spent. Has that happened in the past?
You do get financial reports, so those are distributed, and so that kind of shows all the information and the money that's come in and how that's spent. So that's their kind of their operating budget information.
Is that, when you say that we get it, is it just council, or is that something the
Council's been getting that, and then when public records request, that information is shared as well.
Okay. So I can probably just try to follow up with you and not take a ton of time, but I'm just trying to understand, if we give them, say, $45,000 this year, I think we have a proposal to cut that a bit, due to the situation we're in. Do we get an actual, this is what we spent your $45,000 on, report?
It's not that way because it shows the whole budget, but they break it out into the different projects. So the city they're assisting with the majority of city efforts. So right now, the Envision Coeur d'Alene is a huge effort. So that's one of the main things that the organization has been assisting us with in all of the community engagement surveys. We have weekly meetings with staff and the project management team. So there's all of that happening. Then they're also assisting with some of the things like our GEM symposium, the childcare efforts that are happening across the community. So there's a bunch of things that are being worked on. They were doing the opening books, opening doors, outreach for the early childhood education. So the budget shows that. It just doesn't say, here's how you were $45,000. It shows how all the money, it does continue to show who's contributed the money.
And Christy, we had some conversation early on in the budget process about through the year having these groups come from Jobs Plus to 2030 and to make presentations to us, and that's something that we'll follow up throughout the year to have presentations from each one of those groups so everyone can understand exactly where those dollars are going. And so we can move forward with that.
And I think that's fine. I'm just wondering if this council would think it's reasonable that just for, I think, what is it, 40,000 this year? Is it reasonable to say, just shoot us a rundown of how you spent the money? Just that 40,000? Is that reasonable?
Well, I think 40,000 is part of their revenue, right? So their total revenue, let's say the total revenue is 140, right? They get 40 from the city, and I'm just throwing out this number, so they get 140. So we get 140,000 total, and then they will have a list of expenditures of what they spent on. They obviously have staff costs and other costs. It's been put under the planning department budget. Before it was an administrative line item, but was put under the planning department budget. Hillary controls her budget. She feels that it is a very worthwhile expenditure in the planning department. But we can get those numbers, but it won't be specifically what did you spend the city of Coeur d'Alene's 40 on. 40 will be part of their total revenue, similar to, I think this year we were 25, and I think this year we're 20 to Jobs Plus. So 20,000 is our contribution to Jobs Plus. So, but we can get some more detail on that.
Okay, thank you.
Does council want any more input?
I just wanted to make a comment.
I'll ask him to come up.
You ask him to come up, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr.
So briefly, David, because we've heard you several times. You're not a fan of 2030. We know that. We get that.
Okay, you used the number out of thin air, apparently, 140,000.
No, David, I gave an example of what. No, don't say it was thin air. I gave an example of what that was.
Their tax return for 2019 showed total donations of $88,610. They got last year $45,000 from you, $25,000 from Ignite. Okay, you do the arithmetic. You said it's really a city committee. Then
no, I did not say it was a city committee.
It does the work of a city committee.
I didn't say it does the work of a city committee. I said that, David, what I said was it's part of the planning department's budget, and Hillary has oversight over her budget, and it's a line item in that budget. That's what I said.
And presumably it does things for them. It's an illegal delegation of authority from you, which are the municipal legislative body, and you are only allowed to delegate your legislative authority in accordance with the code, which requires that it be to a committee, commission, board created by ordinance, by you all, which lays out its responsibilities and duties and powers, and whose members are appointed by you, the mayor, with the council's approval.
So David, I'm going to stop you there. I'm going to stop you there. You said illegal, right? You threw out the word illegal. So that if you believe it's illegal, state how you believe it's illegal. It'll go to our legal staff. They'll make an opinion on that. Okay.
Okay. And it evades transparency. If it complied with the law and this work, whatever they're doing, was being done by a committee, commission, board, like the Bicycle Ped Committee or whoever, that's a government body subject to the Public Records Act and the Open Meetings laws. Their meetings would have to be open to the public on written notice, agenda, and minutes, and they would have to be subject to the public records requests by the public. They're not. We've sent them countless emails asking for their minutes. They blow us off. We've sent them countless emails asking them to open their meetings. They blow us off. So I send public records requests to the city thinking, well, maybe the city got some, and I get a few here and there. But that's not a substitute for transparency. $88,610 was their total donations on their 2019 tax return. $45,000 from you, $25,000 from Ignite. The taxpayers are virtually paying for this whole thing. Yet when you ask for transparency, they say, oh, we're private.
Okay. So David, if you'd like to follow up on your comment about illegal, I take that very seriously. If you have some documentation of how it's illegal, I'd like to have our legal staff take a look at it.
I've argued the point in my turn columns in the newspaper. I specifically cited the code section, Idaho Code 5210, in my second my turn column about this, to which Mr. Gridley, the Friday evening after the Friday morning that appeared, Mr. Gridley sent me an email. So he obviously read it. That's my point. Maybe read the code section.
Email me exactly what your opinion is. I'll get it to Mike, and we'll get an illegal opinion on that.
Mayor Widmeyer,
Yes.
I might add to that if Mr. Lyons has concerns about us, he can send it to the prosecuting attorney, Barry McHugh. He can send it to the Attorney General's office if he has some question about us.
That's enough. That's enough. We're done with that issue. Anyone else wishing to give some lively public comment tonight? So now is the time for council to discuss. Vonnie has worked and her staff have worked long and hard on the budget. Any other questions, Dan?
So I'd like to make a couple of motions regarding some items, and I'm cool if no one seconds these. Just going to throw it out there. Would make a motion to cut the 2030 budget of $45,000 from the planning department budget, but keep the cash in the planning department budget.
I think it's 40. I think it's 40 now.
Okay, if it's 40 now, then I have an older copy, but that amount.
So you maybe clarify the motion, so council, again, you want to reduce, to not
remove
fund.
that line item, but keep the money in the planning department, so it's not a budget reduction.
Okay, so that's the motion.
So Dan, I'll second for discussion, so you can tell us what you're thinking.
Thank you. So I'm not going to go to the illegal thing, David, but I do agree on the transparency. I also see the 2030 role in the future of the city as being more of a subcommittee of planning, which I think would address a lot of Mr. Lyons' issues. And therefore, the $45,000 retained in the planning department would go to help fund whatever activities we rely on 2030 for, but it would be in-house. It would be a city committee appointed by the mayor, meeting under the guise of the open meeting law, serving the same mission statement, which I want to support, which is continuing that 2030 vision, but it would just be a city committee. And that's just the basis of the proposal.
Okay. Other council, Kiki, you had that look on your face.
That's really interesting to talk about. What I'm hearing you say is that in the upcoming fiscal year, there would be no funding that goes directly to 2030. How does that affect the work in progress of the comp plan right now? And here's my thought process behind that. We, as a city, have agreed to support a number of nonprofits in different ways. And I recall that we get, this could be pre-COVID, but we normally get a presentation that's fairly detailed about what they do, how they use their money, what their impact in the community is, and it strengthens the reason for their partnership with the city. We haven't seen those presentations lately, but it sounds like we're going to continue to have them. So I know that we've invested a lot of money in 2030. My concern with your comments right now are that I'm not positive that this year's budget is the timing to have that executed. They have done, and from my understanding, I've gotten involved with a lot of, their committees with the Envision program, and they've been kind of the boots on the ground organization to get the comp plan finished. I want the comp plan finished on schedule. So throwing this curveball right now, I'm concerned that that will affect the comp plan, and so the timing is the issue I would have with it. So maybe Hillary, you could speak to that.
Absolutely, that would definitely throw a huge wrench into the comp plan. Not only that, planning already has 3 commissions that we oversee, so to take on an additional commission is a lot of staff time. So that's the benefit of having CDA 2030 is they're a partner organization. So Nicole Kaler and Marie Nail, they were able to have the oversight of volunteer board as well. And so a lot of the work can be done and staff isn't part of it. And it's not just all city things. Some of the things they're working on are to the greater Coeur d'Alene area. So they're lake management, things like that. That's not just city of Coeur d'Alene. They are a very beneficial organization. I understand that there's concerns, but they are truly functioning as a nonprofit organization. If the city said we'd like to see, have your minutes posted, things like that as part of our commitment to fund the organization, that would be something that would be reasonable. But to take it away, especially at this time, is terrible timing for planning department. We have all these balls in the air. We have the comprehensive plan, we're working on core housing, we have everything happening at the same time. So that would be a huge concern to me.
Woody?
Well, that's why I was going to ask her what impact it would have. I don't like having a lot of outside groups feeding us stuff. I mean, it just kind of goes back to the old days where we used to do it. But I understand, we've talked, this comp plan isn't our doings. It's the legislature saying you have to jump through all these crazy hoops. And I guess we're lucky to have them doing it. It does bother me, the same thing about the money. I'd like to be able to start taking it away and let them survive on their own if they're that valuable. We're carrying them and we're using them, I guess is a good way to look at it. So I think we've discussed this early on about taking money and trying to save. Well, we're already 1.2 in fund balance. What's another 40,000? It won't even show. But you know what I'm saying? It's just, I think we have to project forward on this to say, look, let's step away from this when we can. I know they do a lot of good stuff, but I think it's appropriate for this time, and the comp plan's just a pain. You know, I get it. Don't agree with it, but I get it. We have to go through it. So I think at this time, I support you, but I can't support you at this point.
Other discussion on Dan's motion? Christie?
Thank you. Dan, I guess I would end up in the same spot just because we're at the 11th hour, and we would have to totally obliterate an organization. But the comments that you've made moving forward, I guess we should have some discussion around it. I did get the opportunity to sit through a presentation by 2030. It was a really good presentation. They're doing some fabulous things in the community. The question is, can we fund it with taxpayer dollars? I mean, that's going to be what we talk about all the time when it's a 501(c). So I'd like to carry on that discussion and find ways to help them be successful, even if we can't continue to fund them long-term. Try to find maybe private funding rather than public funding. But now's just not the time at the 11th hour.
So, Dan?
Well, just to boil mine down, I also would agree the timing, this would be the worst timing to try to take that kind of a sharp turn right now, but should it come in under more scrutiny, that's reasonable. I would guess from a lot of nonprofit experience that, what they end up doing and with the amount of volunteers that they have, we probably get we get a lot of value for our money because it expands to a whole lot of things versus if we were paying staff internally to do that. I mean, one of the principles we try to do is, if you can have kind of privatize some of that rather than more government employees. So anyway, that's the issue, but should we take a look at it? Yes, and if, I'm sure things like minutes, I do know too, unless it ends up like, say, in a church budget or something where if somebody gives $1,000 and we want it to go to, a new pew or something, you do that, but generally the money goes in there and you don't color code, this 1,000 and that 1,000. So, but I'm guessing they have, they probably have more detail. It exists probably way more detail than we've looked at. So, but anyway, that's.
And this is an issue, to be honest, has come up with every year that we talk about 2030 and whether we feel that it's worth the taxpayer money. So I think it's a good idea to continue that conversation.
And not just them, yeah.
And so, and I think we've talked about it because we're going to have a lot of those, so many times you just do the same thing year after year after year. And I think that council has said, we want these organizations to come before us and to give presentations that, okay, we're paying $40,000. What are we going to get? What are we getting for our $40,000? Hillary believes that it is a good contributing part of her planning commission, and I think she would probably have a very strong argument that it's worth probably more than $40,000. So, but that's something that we need to hear, and council needs to hear. So, do we have any more comments on Dan's motion? So, I want to repeat that, or could you repeat that, please, Renata?
Sure. Motion by Gookin, seconded by Wood, to cut the 2030 budget approximately, or I quoted $40,000 from the planning budget, but keep the amount in the planning department budget.
Okay, so all those in favor? Any opposed?
Aye.
Aye.
Nay.
Okay, all right, so, but good discussion, that's a good discussion.
That will
to have.
come back, just a heads up.
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor, I have another motion I'd like to make. So, and this will be the final one, thank you. Was an issue that arose earlier this year regarding the water department and a change or reclassification of a position from pay grade 5 to pay grade 10. And it was my understanding that council was not in favor of having 2 administrative assistants in the water department. My understanding is that is the current proposal in the water department budget, so I would like to move to reclassify that position, as the second administrative assistant, back to the level 5, which it is this year. So basically continuing the staffing from this year to next.
So Dan's motion is to change the pay grade from a level 10, is that right, Dan? Level 10 to a level 5, so that's Dan's motion.
I'm going to second that for discussion.
Okay. Further discussion?
And that's what I said. So it came to us that there was a level 10 and a level 5 in there, and the level 5 was doing the work of the level 10. And so the solution was to promote the level 5 to a level 10. This would be the only department in the city that would have 2 administrative assistants. I went and looked at the situation. My observation was that not to get into employee issues, but that the 2 positions should just be swapped and one person should do the other job. That was not the solution that was offered in the budget, despite what we said at our earlier meeting. And now, if the budget is approved, there will be funding available in the water department for 2 administrative assistants. I really wish council wouldn't work with this kind of employment level stuff. This is a management issue, but it came to us, and it was in the budget, and it was something that I said to myself when this came forward. I said, I'm going to remember this. We don't want that second level 10. It's in the budget. I want to pull it out.
Okay. Further discussion by council?
Yeah,
Christine?
Mr. Mayor, maybe we could have, Dan's right, it is not usually that sort of thing that comes to council. We don't want to be that far down in the weeds, but we want the assurance from our city administrator and from our water department head that this is necessary and that there's no other way around this. So I don't know if Troy, without talking about personnel, we'll say employee A, can you speak to that, Troy, or Terry?
Terry's here.
I figured we'd be back up here talking about this issue before we got done. Yes, and that position has proved very fruitful, especially in the recent COVID climate, as one of the employees was very susceptible and ended up working from home. So the coverage really helped out a lot, and there is a considerable workload in this department that most of you don't realize. It's difficult to see. Dan kind of got, Councilman Gookin kind of got a little off track there a little bit. Forgive me for that. But the employee that you're referencing is a very valid employee. She does her job very well. There is a definite workload with all of our metering and all that, meter change out and all the programs that we do need both of those positions, and they do need to be at that level. They both do that same job description, and they do them very well and very efficiently. Taking that level back to a 5, we are in danger of losing that employee because at this point she has passed up other opportunities to get to that pay scale. And in my heart, I believe it's justified.
Thank you, Terry.
Any other questions for Terry?
Troy, maybe have a comment on that?
We work through the personnel issues when we bring the department heads in and the directors to work through it. That department continues to grow based on the gallonage that you're hearing about and the number of wells. We also have continuing customer service issues as our community grows. So I believe our public safety now has a couple of full-time admins based on the size of the department. This is quite a large organization with lots of dollars flowing through, so I believe that the redundancy helps out. So yes, we justified it based on the plan that Mr. Pickle has in place.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Terry?
Mr. Mayor. Oh, I was
Oh.
just going to address.
I think we're
So
good, Terry.
Gookin, you don't think we're in the weeds on employment, and yet we talk about sergeants and fire chiefs, and come on, we're in it. And it's how we think from here, it looks like over there, just like asking Hillary if 2030 is good. We don't like it, I get it, but it's a tool for her. I hear what you're saying. I get down in the weeds on traffic lights and how much paint's on the street for bicycle lanes makes me crazy, right? But when we get into employment and jobs, we're saying, yeah, we can have a sergeant, yeah, we can have a police this, we can get another parks guy. Everybody's moving things around trying to save money and do a good job. And that's what I'm so proud of this city, is that's what they do. If we take the money away, they make it work. And that makes me feel good about what we do here, but mostly about them taking care of business. The way the sergeant got here and the fire chief and all that, when my thought was nobody goes anywhere, everybody stops and holds on for a year. Well, that didn't get any traction, and I get it. I worry about next year, but that's beside the point. But I look at city administration and the mayor, I know they grind these guys when it comes down to asking for help. They really have to justify it, and I believe that these guys, these department heads, whatever you want to call them, are on our side. They're trying to spend their money efficiently and not be wasteful and be efficient and thorough, and that's the team thing, So I kind of hear what you're saying, but I don't want to pick on one. I already picked on the chief, fire chief, and the police chief, and Hillary. So I don't know if I said anything, but I got it off my chest and I feel better. Thank you.
Other council discussion? So everyone understand the motion then? So all those in favor of the motion of downgrading a position in water from grade 10 to grade 5, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay.
Hey.
Okay, so that motion does not make it. Anything else down there, Dan?
Oh, I could come up with something. But I won't.
So I will, just want to give, if there's anyone else in the audience that has not given public comment on the budget, if there is anyone, I don't see anyone, so I will close the public comment portion of that and look for council action.
So, Mr. Mayor, I move to dispense with the rule and read Council Bill 201011 once by title only.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion on that item? Roll call, please, Renata.
English,
Yes.
Wood,
Yes.
Miller,
Yes?
McEvers,
Yes.
Gookin.
Yeah.
Motion carried. Renata, if you could read the title, please.
Council Bill number 20-1011, an ordinance entitled the Annual Appropriation Ordinance for the fiscal year beginning October 1, 2020, appropriating the sum of $103,535,756 to defray the expenses and liability of the city of Coeur d'Alene for said year, levying a sufficient tax upon the taxable property within said city for general revenue purposes for which such appropriation is made, levying special taxes upon the taxable property with said city for special revenue purposes within the limits of said city of Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, providing for severability and providing an effective date hereof.
So we'd be looking for further council action.
But do we do a roll call? Did we do the roll call?
Oh,
Okay, good. All right. Yeah, so then if we're ready, then I would do a motion to adopt Council Bill 201011.
Second?
motion and a second. Further discussion. Dan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, yeah, I'm going to vote for this because it's zero. Thank you, and thank you for all your hard work. I know you do a lot of good work behind the scenes. You put in a lot of effort to this, so I appreciate that.
Thank you,
Hope
Dan.
the public knows that and appreciates that, too. I think the 0% is going to help a lot of people who've been hard hit, people who are not in a position, normally, I mean, like, I could afford it, but there's a lot of people out there who've been hit hard by COVID. The most vulnerable among us, single mothers, the elderly, that kind of, I'm glad we're going to be able to help them out with a zero. I'm also okay with using fund balance. we always talk about fund balance for an emergency. Can anyone think of anything that happened this year that could even slightly be considered an emergency? And therefore, I'm okay with it. Not forever, but this year, I'm good. Thank you.
Any other further discussion? Woody?
God, I feel like I'm Dan on the other side. Dan, you always vote against always against. I don't remember you ever saying yeah to a budget hearing, but then I'm feeling I have to say no because of fund balance. And I don't like being one guy going, I'm right. In my heart, I'm right. Fund balance is not something that you use to keep things going. What happens next? We got $1 million, $1 million out of fund balance just to take care of employees. They're worth it, don't get me wrong. But next year, are we going to dip again? And nothing's going to happen all year that requires an emergency or something. The problem I have is I don't have an answer. I don't have an answer where we get $1 million to take care of the employees this coming year. Is it going to come from taxes? Is it going to come from other revenue streams? I kind of doubt it, but it might be less. I think I talked to Vonnie. She said, Wood, it might not be $1 million too. We might be lucky and Spectrum will pick up another $100,000, and all these other things that we look at for revenue, sales tax, all the things that we don't really have much control over, but people are still buying stuff. It's real difficult for me to be here going, it's okay to spend fund balance. In my heart, it says not. It's always been there for buying hotels, buying railroad right-of-ways, things that we feel are important. It's not something you budget for. It's always there in case you need it and some big stuff happens, or you go borrow it. This has been a most conservative city operation. I blame this guy for teaching me that, Troy. You pay for cash, you don't borrow money. I mean, that's just the way I've been brought up here. And this just feels weird. And again, I wish I had to be able to say no because, and here's how it should be. I don't. And since we don't want to ask the employees to take less for a year or 2 years, like we did in '08, I just have to follow my heart and say I can't support this because of taking that much money out of fund balance. It just doesn't feel right. So this is a hard one for me.
Thank you, Wood. Any other comments? Roll call, please, Renata.
English,
Yes.
Wood,
Yes.
Miller,
Yes.
McEvers,
No.
Gookin.
Yes.
Motion carried. Before we adjourn for tonight, gosh, we've been in this COVID thing, it seems like Dan, go ahead with your motion.
Thank you, Mr.
there.
Mayor. This was the item that was added at the last minute, so it's understandable that
What would we do without?
stay in your seats and keep your hats on. So I would like, this is new this year. This was added, Idaho Code took effect July 1st. And this is a legislative hearing again. So I guess, Mr. Mayor, you need to open it as a hearing, or I'm lost.
No,
Renata?
we had it as the original hearing was noted to carry both items.
Okay, so it was under that original hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I would make a motion. This is regarding the appropriations again, and this is the foregone. Normally, we just go ahead and add the foregone to the running total. We have to now, because of this new rule, make a motion to say how much we're going to add. The motion is to add the full foregone tax increase that we're not taking, which is listed here as $687,110. So I would make a motion to dispense with the rule and read Council Bill. Is the number wrong? What is the number, Renata?
Sorry, it is approving Resolution 20-049.
Which I will dispense with the rule and read Council Bill 20-049 once by title only.
Sorry, that's a resolution, not an ordinance.
Oh, I'm
So it's
sorry.
just approval of the resolution. Sorry for the typo there.
Very good. So we just need to pass the resolution?
Yeah.
So just motion to adopt Resolution 20-049.
I'll second that.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion on that? Dan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So normally I would probably vote against this, but The reason I'm going to do this is because we need to have an insurance policy in case the governor's rebate program that we're adopting turns out not to be legal. We're going to need to fetch that money back, and I'd feel much more comfortable keeping that on the books as opposed to taking it off the books. So that's my argument.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Dan, I completely agree with you. We're moving forward in good faith. We don't know where the lawsuit will end up. Hopefully, the governor's put something out there that's solid for all the cities in Idaho and counties. But if not, you're absolutely right. So I agree with you.
Thank you. Any further discussion on that? Renata, does that need a roll call?
Yes, sure does.
So, motion and second to adopt resolution number 20-049. Roll call, please.
English,
Yes?
Wood,
Yes.
Miller,
Yes.
McEvers,
Yes.
Gookin.
Yes.
Motion carried. So now, before we go, I just wanted to talk about this COVID situation. It seems like we've been in this for so long, and it all started way back in March. So really, it's been not quite 6 months, but it seems like 6 years. But we're doing better. And I wanted to thank Kiki for her campaign. I think that has helped. Our caseload and our hospitalizations peaked in the middle of July. We've done better. Whether you believe in masking or not, I think that has helped. I think social distancing has helped. I just think general awareness has helped. So our daily caseload number is down, but we cannot let up at this point. I mean, we have schools opening next week. And so I just want to remind everyone, let's just keep doing the right thing. For those that don't believe in masks, just believe in social distancing. Wake up every morning just saying that, you know what, I'm not going to get COVID, or I'm not going to give anyone COVID. Everyone do that. And so I think we can get through this, and I might see a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel, but we're certainly not there yet. And I don't want anyone to let up. And I think we can get through this, and hopefully by the end of the year or the beginning of next year, we're out of the weeds on that. So anyway, that's it. Now we'll look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, everyone.